Hey Joshua, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today. I really appreciate you giving me your time.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, and it's nice to talk in person. We've interacted on social media for quite a while, and chat a few times in person. But looking forward to hanging out with you.
That's right. Well, for anyone who's new here, if there happens to be anyone who doesn't know who you are or who's new to minimalism, I've already given you a bit of an introduction about what you do, but could you tell us a little bit about how you got started in minimalism and blogging?
Yeah, because it wasn't something that I thought I would ever end up doing in my life, actually. I typically say I was living a pretty typical middle-class American lifestyle. I was a pastor, so I worked at churches, nonprofit organizations, so I wasn't making a ton of money, and making a lot of money was never my goal. But as the years progressed and you kind of move up into different jobs and pay increases come along the way, it seems like every time a pay increase came into my life, I just ended up spending it on, moved into a couple bigger houses when we moved towns, and then just filled the house with different things. As most Americans, as most people do, I guess, around the world, really, when financial means allow them to. But 13 years ago, it was a Saturday morning, and I went out to clean my garage with my 5-year-old son, who lasted about 30 seconds and then went off into the backyard to play. I kept working on the garage, and it took me hours to sort and clean out everything. And I started complaining to my neighbor that this process was taking such a long time. And she's the one who first introduced me to the word minimalism. She said, that's why my daughter, as I was complaining about how many hours I had spent cleaning out my garage, she says, that's why my daughter's a minimalist. She keeps telling me I don't need to own so much stuff. And I just looked and saw my son alone in the backyard where he'd been all morning, and this pile of stuff I'd been taking care of all morning. And I think just finally, for the first time, realized how our possessions keep us from more important pursuits in life. And so that was my introduction to minimalism. And then I started the blog, Becoming Minimalist, that weekend, Monday. So Saturday, by Monday, I started the blog just to keep a little diary, a journal of what we were getting rid of and what we were keeping and the decisions we were making. So maybe you covered all that in the introduction.
No, I didn't, but that was really quick. The following Monday, you actually started blogging. I can understand that, because when I started decluttering, I ended up beginning to film it for YouTube. That's how I started my YouTube channel. And it's kind of nice to go through that process of documentation. You can look back and see the before and after as well. I always like to take before and after pictures still when I've cleaned up an area.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact moment of inspiration or decision to start it, but I gone back and look at the date, and I know that my first post was on the Monday after the Saturday, and it was, hey, we've just made this decision, and this is going to be the place where I write about it. So I think I always kind of wanted to have like a little blog about different things or things going on in my life, and this just seemed like a good thing to do. So
yeah, I totally get that, because I'd always thought, it'd be good to start a YouTube channel, because the whole creative thing, I was on maternity leave at the time after my second child, but I didn't know what I want to talk about or video. And so that just seemed like a really good idea, because there was content there. But yeah, I love that, because it's such a sliding doors moment. I wonder what would have happened if your neighbor hadn't come and spoken to you that day.
yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea. I sometimes even wonder what the process or journey would have looked like if I hadn't started the blog. I think I would still be living a minimalist life. I don't think the blog is the primary motivation for me, but it was a very helpful motivation to keep moving along and to keep momentum, because I was, I need to find something to declutter today so I can write about it on the blog, or even more, as I was like noticing things because I was looking for things to write about. So, hey, I just noticed how much easier it was to clean the living room today because we owned less things. Or, hey, here's this article that I just read on this other website about minimalism, and here's some of the interesting points that I learned about minimalism that I wanted to share with you. And so I think the whole like writing down of it was just very motivating and kept me focused more than if I didn't have that, I think, happening in my life.
Yeah, I think it gives you, a reason to keep going, doesn't it? Definitely. Yeah, because once I put the first video, I was like, okay, well, let's do closets now. Let's film that too. So you just kind of keep going.
Yeah.
It's a good way. It's a good motivational tip for anyone who's wanting to get started.
I agree. I agree. I always tell people, tell a friend that you're doing it. You don't have to start a blog or a YouTube channel, but even just telling a friend or a neighbor or a family member, someone who's going to cheer for you, and someone who the next time you see them in 2 weeks, they're going to ask you, how are you doing in the decluttering? You know, it'll motivate you to have something to tell them.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah, it's a good story. I think I've read all of your books. I've definitely read most of them. And I know people talk a lot about your latest books, but the one that I resonated the most with, and I think it's naturally because that's the stage of life I'm in, is Clutter Free with Kids. And my kids are 5 and 9 now. So they were not even 1 and 5 when I started decluttering. I know yours were quite young now, they're teenagers. But I guess because you're a little bit more ahead on the journey than I am, what are some of the challenges you've had to navigate in raising your children in a minimalist family? So, for example, I had my daughter's 5th birthday party this year before we went into lockdown, and it was probably the most amount of kids. I think there were about 15 children were invited. It was the biggest birthday party I'd held for one of my children, and there were so many gifts. And she loved them, but she didn't play with all of them. She certainly hasn't used all of them. I ended up regifting some of them or putting some away for later. I've also suggested to my husband, how about a gift giving pool? We just ask people, contribute $5 or $10, because in the birthday party season, it gets quite expensive. By the time you spend $20 on a present for each child that's having a birthday, it adds up. And I thought, what about a gift giving pool? And he's like, no, that's a terrible idea. My husband's not a minimalist at all. So he thought that was a very strange idea. But what are some of the things you've had to navigate with things like birthday parties or your kids wanting something or wanting more stuff?
Yeah. Okay. I have a whole bunch of questions. Can I ask you some questions first?
Yeah, sure.
I I once had a mom. I was just a friend of mine, and she isn't into minimalism either. But she came to me and she said her daughter was turning 8 or 9 or 10, somewhere in that range. And she said, I'm thinking about telling all the guests just to bring $10 rather than bringing a gift. And then we will use all the money to buy her a bike because her friend wanted a bike, but none of her friends were going to bring like $100 bike over for her. And she said, but if everyone brought $10, then we could buy this bike and this could be this group gift. And she asked me, how do I think the other parents would feel about it? Which is exactly the thing you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember saying, I said, honestly, I'm not a mom, so maybe there's a different feeling there. But I was thinking to myself, I think they'll love the idea, because every time I know my wife takes my daughter to a birthday party, they got to run to the store, and like no one knows what the person wants or how much the other people are going to be spending. It's like this whole ordeal of trying to decide, well, what doesn't she have? What does she like? What kind of toys would she like? And I just said, I kind of think the moms would love the idea of not having to run to Target and guess what your daughter wants. And it's different than, hey, just bring her money, right? Like it's hey, we're buying this thing together to give to her. And so that's kind of thing that you were talking about. But your husband, now, why was your husband not in favor? He didn't like
he
asking
wanted my
her for
daughter
money,
to have
or
a
he
whole
wanted...
lot of stuff to unwrap. He said, it's the whole thing of, getting to unwrap all the presents. And he made me feel a little, it did sound like a little bit like I might be depriving her of that experience. And I have to say, I definitely don't do a birthday party every year, and I don't do big birthday parties. So because 5 is kind of a milestone birthday, that's what you do. But I was thinking, we do it at weddings. We had a wishing well style thing, and we actually told people we're going to put the money towards experiences for our honeymoon. So they knew, we want to go scuba diving while we're in Fiji. We want to go on this little cruise and things like that. So they knew what the money was for. And we had some people who loved that idea, I guess, again, because they didn't have to run out and buy something. But then there were some of the, especially, actually, it was interesting, the older generation, like some of the older family relatives, they still, even though they're traveling from New Zealand to Australia for the wedding, they still brought physical gifts, and that was their preference. So I guess you could propose that idea, and if people didn't want to, they wouldn't have to do that. If they still wanted to bring a physical gift, they could. But for some other parents, might be, oh, that's easy, I'll just bring $10.
Yeah. I often wonder if my children's experiences are really all that different from other kids' experiences, whether they're growing up with parents who are trying to live a minimalist life or not, because the questions of, like, I want more toys, like, I don't think that goes away by buying them more toys. And I learned that there were two kids in the of Salem's, my son's friends. This was maybe their 10-year-old birthday party. I forget where it was. We were driving somewhere, and the one 10-year-old's dad owned a Corvette, and the other 10-year-old's dad owned a BMW. And they were like jealous of the other person. Like, the one who had the BMW was jealous of the Corvette, and the Corvette was jealous of the BMW. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't think you outspend envy. It's not because we're trying to live a minimalist life doesn't mean that my kids want what other kids have. Like, every kid wants what other kids have. And I think every child grows up in a family where the parents are making decisions about what they're going to do with the money that they have. And some parents have less money than others. And so some parents will say to me, well, how do you handle Christmas? I can't imagine my son or daughter having to go back to school and find out that the other kids got a whole bunch more gifts than they got. I just don't want that to happen to my child. And I'm like, but that happens every day. Like, there's only one child in the classroom who got the most gifts. Like, everyone else, there was someone who got more. And so you don't resolve that by buying more gifts.
I think that applies to Christmas too, because some kids might go, well, that kid got more than me at Christmas. Does that mean he was, on the nice list because he was more well behaved?
Yeah. And some parents, they save more money, or some people give more money, or some people do spend more on experiences over Christmas than gifts. And some people have limitations as to how many gifts they give. And so I've often wondered what different challenges my kids face than other kids. And we've never been like extreme minimalists where it's like they only have 10 articles of clothing and they get 0 gifts for Christmas. Like, we've never been to that extreme. I suppose there would be some really countercultural challenges and behaviors and decisions that might be a challenge. But for us, I think our kids know that we just think that there are more important things to do with our money than buy physical possessions. And we probably go on some nicer trips than some of their friends get to go on, but some of their friends might have nicer things at home than we do. But we've always worked hard to explain why we live the way we do. And I think that those are helpful things for kids to see more than anything else. So
I agree with you. I mean, I have a couple of friends who don't consider themselves to be minimalist, or they don't use that term, but some of them are actually probably stricter than me about, oh, we're not using that. Okay, out it goes. The kids haven't used that, so it's going. We're not even going to store it away in case they might, for a couple of weeks, in case they might change their mind. It's just going. So I think some people may be more minimalistic, but they don't even really use that term. And I think I go through phases of using the word minimalism because I think it can scare some people off. Some people associate minimalism with deprivation or scarcity, which I don't believe to be true at all. But have you faced that, from conversations with friends and family or colleagues on your journey of minimalism, where they feel like it is deprivation, or they're opposed to it or a bit scared off by it?
So 13 years ago, when I started writing, I would use the word a lot when I wrote, but whenever I was going to go speak somewhere, let's say an organization was having me come and speak in their town and they wanted people to come to it. 10 years ago, I would say, don't use the word minimalism in the title because people won't come. You can talk about decluttering, you can talk about simplicity, you can talk about overcoming consumerism. Like you can use those words, but don't use the word minimalism because I don't think people will come. And then the word changed, or at least generally accepted the word, I think became something that people were very intrigued with. Then there was a stretch where, oh, what is this minimalism thing I keep hearing about? I want to go to hear about minimalism and what this issue is. And so there's a lot of, I think, describing and defining it to people who are interested. And now, I don't know, maybe this third wave of people know it and they hear it and they have a better idea of what it was 10 years ago, but they're not, they've heard it and they know they're not interested. And so I don't know how it's going to look going forward as I try to encourage people to embrace it. I haven't had a lot. I always say when I have the opportunity to describe what I mean by minimalism, I don't think a lot of people disagree with me. There's a percentage of people that still do and say, no, I want all my stuff and my stuff makes me happy. And who are you to tell me that I can't buy whatever I want? But it's a pretty small percentage of people. So really, a limited number of people. I had an uncle one time who was really kind of razzing me that I called myself becoming minimalist, but I owned a lawnmower and he didn't think that made any sense. I had an employee one time. It was like a legitimate question about, I know you're writing about minimalism, but you still own a cell phone. What's going on there? How can you do that? And so I think that there's a few of those conversations, but really maybe on the palm of one hand. But I was as you were asking the question, I think that just to go real deep, real quick, like my family's always been pretty religious, spiritual, like a pretty faith-filled family, both mine and my wife's. And so I think there's like a general assumption that there's more to life than the world around us, and there's more things going on than just physical possessions, and there's some deeper meaning or fulfillment that can be found in life outside of those things, even though we were all falling into the trap of buying them. I think that the lifestyle tends to make sense to some worldviews more than others, and so most of my immediate family, at least, kind of embrace some of that worldview. So
you're right, I agree. It's a lot more well known and people understand a lot more because there's people like you and there's Joshua and Ryan of the Minimalists, what they do. I mean, I love the way they poke fun at it sometimes too. Ryan doing his apartment tour and he's like sitting on like invisible furniture and things like that. That was quite funny. It's a lot more well known. And I always say to people who ask me about it, I say, well, you don't need to become a minimalist, but you can apply some of the principles of simpler living and minimalism to your life. Yeah, because I think people are beginning to realize, especially with the pandemic, that stuff isn't everything. It's being with the people that you love. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, or even going back to the first conversation about children, like I always say, we're all minimizing something. Like we all, like I love saying that because I think it's true. Like if I'm spending my money on physical possessions, then it means I am minimizing the money that I have for experiences or giving, saving, retiring, working less. Like there's all like we're all minimizing something. I just think the best thing that we can minimize is our physical possessions and use some of our money for other more important pursuits. So
definitely. And that lifestyles creep is real. I mean, when I was in corporate, particularly in my sort of early to mid 20s, when I was climbing up the corporate ladder, when I look back, that lifestyle creep, you get a pay rise and you start spending a bit more and upgrading a bit more instead of maintaining your lifestyle and putting that money away towards, your mortgage or reducing debt or whatever it is. It's such an easy thing to fall into, with the influences that we have around us externally, social media, keeping up with the Joneses, all that kind of stuff. But I love this story. I think it might have been an article you wrote sometime about going with your son to purchase something from a toy store. And you went with the intention, I think it was a skateboard or a bike or something you were going to buy. And he just saw, I think it was like a toy he saw, and he just wanted that toy. And I've had that challenge with my kids too, where I said, we're going to go buy something. Oh, I just want this thing, which I know they won't play with that much. They'll get sick of it in 10 minutes and, then they'll waste their birthday gift voucher from, Nana and Granddad. But I sort of don't want to be too controlling and in a way, let them learn their own life lessons about stuff and making decisions on stuff. Is that something you've had to manage as well? How have you managed that? Because I'm like, I don't want this thing in my house because I'm just going to have to declutter it. And I know you won't play with it for more than a week. But, I'm trying not to be too controlling in that way and let them make their own mistakes.
How old are your kids now?
5 and 9. So my son is getting a little bit better, but we just had a situation actually a couple of years ago. I think Beyblades were all the rage here. Come home from school, I want these Beyblades, all the kids are playing with them. So he bought him this big set of Beyblades and they were quite expensive. And then a year or so later, not the hot fad anymore. And we actually ended up selling them secondhand. And just a few months ago, he said, I really want to get some more Beyblades because of pain. I said, no, we already got rid of them. We're done with that. When do you, lay down the rules, and when do you, let them make their own mistakes and learn lessons about money and spending and making choices?
Yeah, gosh, that's a great parenting question. I remember that story, and I remember the details. It was he gotten a gift certificate, or he was been saving up money, one of the two, to buy a skateboard. We went to the Toys R Us toy store to get the skateboard. And before we got to the skateboard section, he found this big dinosaur pop-up tent that he decided that he wanted rather than the skateboard. And I eventually talked him into actually getting the skateboard and not the dinosaur pop-up tent. But I tell the story because I started reflecting on my own life, and I'm like, it was easy for me to see that this pop-up tent was cheap and it wasn't going to be nearly as much fun in the long run as learning how to ride a skateboard. And so explaining that to him was easy for me to, I should say easy for me to do, but it made perfect sense to me. And because this was early in our journey, and I'm like, who is having these conversations with me as the parent? As I take boxes and boxes of things to Goodwill that I shouldn't have bought in the first place. I'm like, there's no one in my life going to the store with me explaining that I shouldn't be spending my money on this. I don't know what the point of the story was, other than I could just see that I had fallen into the same trap that I could see my 9 or 10-year-old son falling into, and yet I've done it repeatedly in my adult life. How do you navigate that as children? I think that there's probably just a lot of different factors that would go into it in that specific situation with me. A primary one, well, probably the two primary ones would be: is it his money or mine? I think that makes a difference. If it's my money buying the thing, then I have the final say in what's being purchased. If it's his money that he worked for or saved or whatever, then I think he gets more flexibility and freedom in making that purchase. I think that the age factors in quite a bit. I think you can controlling isn't the right word, but you can speak into your 5-year-old's decisions more than you can speak into your 15-year-old's decision. And then, you probably have a spectrum in between there as they get older and your life. I always thought pretty good advice about parenting was that you kind of move from controlling to coaching. And so when they're younger, you can really control a lot of their decisions, but the older they get, the more you just turn into coaching and speaking into their life and helping them weigh the decisions and the pros and cons, and then they ultimately get to make the ones that they want. So those would probably be the two biggest factors. There's probably a few times where if it's a really big thing they want to buy or a really expensive thing and you just know it's not a good decision, you might want to, maybe pull out more of a trump card and, please don't, like, you cannot spend your money on this. We're not bringing this into our home, but.
Yeah, and often it's a question of space too. If my son wants another Hot Wheels track, and I'm like, well, you've filled up the storage space that we've reserved for your Hot Wheels track, so that's something I learned from you to allocate the space. Something will have to go out, but also it's your money, so do you really want to spend it on something where you've already got a lot of that stuff? So I love that you said coaching. So yeah, that's definitely a good way to think about it. Maybe a bit of persuasion, a bit of influencing goes on there to try and sway them to the other decision if you think it's the right one. But ultimately, like you said, if it's their money or their voucher, and my parents, they say just let them spend on whatever they want. I'm like, Mum, she gives him very generous amounts of vouchers. Like, I'm going to set aside this much for clothing and things and buy some nice, sneakers and things for him. But so don't tell him that you're giving him the whole amount as a voucher, because then he'll get stars in his eyes and want to spend like the whole amount.
Yeah.
I need to reserve some for some other things.
I think that's great. Like, I think there is space for, no, you can spend this however you want and you can get what you want. Like I would be okay with that. And certainly I'm okay with that to a certain degree, right? Like you orchestrate that pretty well. And then I always, some people ask me, well, how do you teach your kids to be minimalists when they leave the house? How do you teach this value to your kids? And I always say, I don't think it's different than teaching any value to our kids. Like I want my kids to be kind, and I want them to be hardworking, and I want them to be thoughtful and respect their elders and authority. And like I want all these values to be true of them. And I also want them not to waste their money on things that they don't need. And so I don't think any of that, I don't think teaching minimalism looks any different than teaching kindness or perseverance.
I totally agree.
You model it, and
yeah, absolutely.
And then you hope for the best, I always say. And then they move out and you hope for the best, and they'll do whatever they want.
Do you know if either of your children consider themselves to be minimalists?
I don't know. I think that they would. I think that they would say yes, but I don't think you really know until you start having your own house and your own paycheck. And at that point, I think they'll have to redecide. I tell college kids, it's one thing to decide now when you're living in a dorm with 3 other people that you're going to be a minimalist, but it's something very different when you get your first job and your first paycheck and you can afford the bigger house and a bunch of furniture. Like you almost have to redecide when you get a little bit older and have more space and more financial means. So we'll see. I hope they will. And I think that there are more meaningful pursuits than physical possessions, and that maybe if they, get in their 20s and start climbing some corporate ladder and start buying a bunch of stuff, I hope that they would recognize quicker that, hey, maybe Dad knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for my kids as well. But it was so simple in those days. Like I remember when I first moved out of home, it was actually after I graduated university and got my first job, and I moved out. I remember packing up 2 boxes and a suitcase, putting them in my car. And then my friend, dad, helped me put a secondhand bed on a trailer that I bought off, like a Craigslist kind of site. And that was so easy. And then the last time we moved, there's like a moving truck and it cost a couple of $1,000s to get movers to move. I'm like, how did we get from that to this? And that was before I started minimizing. So it was only since I've lived in this house for the last 5 or 6 years that we've become more minimalist. But yeah, the last move was horrendous. Just like, I'm sure there were like 60 to 80 boxes just of kitchen stuff alone. The kitchen, it's amazing how much comes out of the cupboards. It's like Mary Poppins bag. You start emptying the cupboards, just more keeps coming out. So it's funny thinking back, and I thought, when I first moved out of home, I had like 2 boxes full of stuff, like small boxes, not like huge boxes. What has been the hardest item for you personally to declutter? I know you've talked about decluttering a lot of stuff, but was there anything that you found particularly difficult to declutter when you were going through this process? And it may have been over several years.
Well, I have a boring answer and then I have a fun answer. So I'll start with the boring answer. I always say that the hardest thing for us to declutter was things like the basement and ultimately moving into a smaller house. The basement, just because it was in the basement and it was full of like some sentimental things, but it wasn't a space that we spent a lot of time in. And so like the living room and kitchen and bedroom and bathroom, like we did all those first. And it's like, okay, now we got to find the time and go in the basement and set it aside. And so that's the boring answer. We moved into a smaller house about 3.5 years after we found minimalism. Didn't do it in the same town, but when we moved to a different job in a different state, we just bought a smaller house. And so it made a lot of sense. So those are probably the things I think are the hardest for people to do. That's the boring answer. The fun answer is I still have my binder full of baseball cards from when I was a kid. And I was just a meaningful thing for me and my brother and my dad. And I've always loved sports and baseball. And I don't know if there's any value in them at all, but there's always a little.
I was about to say, might be a highly prized collectible.
Yeah, maybe these are worth a lot of money, and so I still have my my binder of baseball cards. It's in the upstairs. It's in the top shelf of one of our closets, and I'm not in that closet very often. But I open the door and see the binder. I'm like, I really don't need those anymore. I should find out where I even take them to get rid of them, but I haven't. So that's the much more fun answer. That's the one you asked me, right?
Yeah, maybe eBay. Have a look on eBay.
I agree, and I love it. But I always, I'm always a little apprehensive to promote things like that because I know that there are a lot of people who want to own less and should own less and want to declutter, but they really do get hung up on, but what if I get rid of something that's worth a lot of money? And most things aren't. Like there are, like it probably goes to a garage sale and one thing out of the 200 things is actually worth something. So those are the type of things where like I get it, and there might be something that's worth it in there, but man, I just am nervous to tell a bunch of people who are trying to declutter that maybe someone sold something for $1 that was worth 150. And they keep everything.
I think if you intend on getting rid of it, you might as well look and see what it's worth. But actually, my podcast episode that I published last week was, should you sell or declutter? And it was talking about the same thing. If it's getting in the way of you continuing to live your life and it's taking up space and it's taking not just physical space, but mental headspace as well, it's stressing you out because it's contributing to the stuff that you're holding on to, then I agree. I think it's better just to give it away. Yeah. And do you have a type of item that you naturally tend to want to buy? So for me, it's notebooks. I journal a lot, and sometimes I'll be, in a stationery store or, even Kmart and think, oh, that's a pretty notebook. I'll buy that because I know I'll use it. But then I might, go home and go, oh, hang on, I've still got 5 other notebooks I haven't started yet. Okay, I need to slow down on the notebooks. That's one thing I naturally tend to want to keep buying. And it's good because they're consumable things. I'll use them. But I do have to rein myself in and go, okay, I don't need 20 notebooks in a box waiting to be journaled in right now.
Yeah. When my parents come to visit, they always make fun of how many condiments we have in the fridge. This type of barbecue sauce or this type of thing, and this recipe that I found, and I bought the one little thing that I needed to have it, and then it sits in the fridge. And so there's a lot of condiments in my fridge. But I think making my living online and doing that for the last 8 years full time, and blogging for a total of 13, and things change and technology comes and goes, and there's probably always a constant pull, like, oh, this new thing is coming out, or even this new resource online that will help you do this better. And I probably, well, I know I've bought some things that I thought were going to help me do my work better, some technology stuff, and then it doesn't really do as much good as I thought it was going to. So that's a tough one for anyone, I think, but someone who doesn't want to buy things that they don't need, and trying to decide, does this actually solve a problem for me? Are my old tools just as effective as the new ones? Will the new ones actually save me time or not? That's a tough line to walk all the time for me. And those are expensive than a bottle of barbecue sauce.
Yeah, well, the condiments, my husband does that too, and I'm the one that usually ends up looking for recipes to try and use them up before they expire, or pass it on to a friend if I know they'll use it. But yeah, he's the sort of person who'll look at a recipe and then he'll go and buy every single ingredient, even if we've already got that stuff in our pantry. So he won't check the pantry inventory first, and we end up with double ups. At the start of the pandemic, he went and bought heaps of canned food. And he even bought things like Spam, which nobody in my family eats. I'm like, if you're going to buy something, at least buy some baked beans or some corn, or things that we can, often use, so that we can get through them a bit quicker. So that was funny. Maybe it's a dad thing, the condiments, the sauces and the...
Maybe.
But yeah, technology too. When I started my YouTube channel, you start watching what the experts are doing. And I've bought things that I didn't end up using because I'm a bit of a technophobe too. I hate learning, plugging things in and trying to get, things right, the settings right and things like that. In the end, I just decided that the simplest option was the most effective.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't going to cost me money in the end. So yeah, technology is definitely one where you can get seduced into thinking that you need certain things to be able to do things. You don't necessarily. This is a fun one. So I know that your wife is a minimalist as well, but are there particular categories of things that you might disagree with your wife, and do you have to compromise on certain types of items? I know that you threw away some birthday party, something she was using to make some food, or some molds or something. I think it was Jello mold, she said, for your son's birthday.
Yes.
And she was looking for them, trying to make the party food. Like my husband and I, well, because he's a non-minimalist, he disagrees with a lot of the things that I want to throw out, and I never declutter his stuff without talking to him about it. But one classic example, we used to have a little garlic crusher, and I noticed we weren't using it. We'd just buy the jar of the already crushed garlic. So I decluttered the garlic crusher, and he doesn't cook as often as I do, and he went and got, the garlic cloves and things for this particular recipe he wanted to cook. And he realized I'd decluttered the garlic crusher. So he went and bought a bigger one. So now we've got an even bigger one sitting in the drawer.
I don't think so. Oh yeah. I think my wife and I disagree on a lot of things. I would be a lot more minimalist than she is. Yeah, I think she's somewhere in between me and probably pretty typical American woman. So I'm thankful that we're, a little bit closer aligned on that, but certainly not as much as we are. But I always think that that's pretty typical for like any relationship. Like we agree on parenting styles, but there are still disagreements that we have in specific circumstances. And we both we both have the same faith, but like still disagreements on like, well, what does that actually mean on Sunday? Or, so there's, I think you always, so we're in the same direction, but I think there's always compromise. And then probably beyond that is like, there are different things in the home that she handles because she's better at it. And there are different things in the home that I handle because I'm better at it. And so me learning to just let her handle the things that she handles and not second guess her decisions. Like that's a real good one. So my daughter will go back to school in August, and my son goes off to college in August, and like they'll go back to school shopping and they'll buy school supplies, and I'm sure she'll get some new clothes for the new school year. And even when they were young, I'd be like, did you really have to buy them more pants? Seems like they have pants to wear. Did you have to buy them new pants? And he's like, you have no idea how many pairs of pants they have and what their size is. Just trust me that I'm not going overboard and that I'm doing that. And things that, make a home feel a little more lived in and a little more home, And I would be fine with nothing on the walls and nothing on the shelves. And she's like, no, I think we need to put something in this corner. It just makes it feel a little more cozy than it did before. And so those are things I think that we probably disagree with on the most. And even she would be the same with me about work. And she'd be like, did you really have to buy that thing for the work that you were doing? And I'm like, yeah, that was a thing that I actually needed. So that's probably where our biggest disagreements are come. And I think that that's just a matter of trust, probably more than anything else. I don't think she's being selfish or harmful. I think that I trust her to do what's best for us and for the family. So yeah,
I think it's the same with my husband. I think it's mainly hobby stuff my husband buys that takes up a lot of room. He does archery, so got this huge bow case in the corner. It's huge, and he actually had a pause from archery and didn't do it for 10 years, and it just stayed in the corner. I said, oh, we can get rid of that, can't we? He said, no, I might use it again one day. And then, of course, when he decided to take the archery again, he went and bought a new bow. So, so we joke about that, but it's not a huge thing. And he knows that, there's certain stuff I don't want to have out around the house because I'm the one responsible for cleaning it. I do most of the cleaning and the dusting inside our house. So I'm kind of like, it's fine if there's space to put it away, but I don't want things out where I have to constantly manage stuff. It's the managing of the stuff that's very time consuming.
And hopefully in a healthy, selfless relationship that works out, right? He respects you, and can see how that would why that would bother you, and they could make your life easier to not have it, and you can defer to him, and well, if he finds joy in that. So yeah.
Well, that's right. Well, apart from owning a cell phone, is there anything that you own that you think would surprise people, given that you're a minimalist?
I work out of an office that was like a renovated home that is what I use for my office. I used to work from home, and then I started writing books, and so I needed a little extra space and a place to put some things, and so I started renting an office, like one office at like a corporate building, and then I was doing the math, and I'm like, as much as I'm paying rent for that one office corner in this corporate park, I would be the same as a house that I could have a mortgage that I could work out of. And so I made that change. That was a couple of years ago, and allows me a little space. Like this is a little separate room that I have set up with like lighting and microphone and stuff. And then I have another room that is an office, and then we do some of our YouTube filming in the basement. So I think people would be surprised to know that I work out of a separate home as my office. But we have a couple different employees now, and it just seems to work better than working out of my home for all the work I do. So
Yeah, that just
I
seems
don't know if that would
practical.
be, I don't know if that would be surprising or not. Like I think that I was either going to be renting a space or have a
Yeah,
space. So
it's a lot smarter investment to own your
yeah.
own space as
And
well, I think.
there's no Xbox here. My son has an Xbox. I don't know if that would surprise anybody.
I noticed, I think you've said in the past, you have a banking and finance degree, which I actually, yeah, I did a business degree at university as well. Do you feel it influenced you having that degree or working in a certain career, in your sort of past working life? Did it have much influence on the way you used to consume, do you think? Because I feel like definitely working in corporate, bonus day, people would go out and, I'd see girls coming back with shopping bags, they'd already spent their annual bonus on things. And remember one time I went and bought a pair of Ralph Lauren sunglasses because, everyone else had designer sunglasses. I still wear that same pair of sunglasses, actually. I bought those in 2007 and I still wear them. I didn't go out and buy heaps more after that. But I feel like it did influence some of the choices I made. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that lifestyle creep that we talked about as well.
I just read a fascinating article in Vox or on Vox. I don't know if it's on the website or what. That's where I read it, and I forget the title. I forget all the details about it, other than for the first time I ever heard someone explain how our reference groups contribute to our consumerism, and how the people you hang around with, we begin to see the way they spend their money, and then that becomes something that we want as well. And so I had a physician friend one time who talked about how it was just hard because he didn't have a really nice car, but he would drive to work every day, and all the other physicians and all the other higher up medical staff had really nice cars. And he's like, it's almost a daily struggle to not want to go buy a really nice car.
Yes.
And so you live in that like white collar world. and the article was making the point how you have like these different levels in the white collar world. You have the interns, and you have the assistants, and then you have the executives, but they're all hanging out in the same space, and your reference becomes, oh, everybody's buying the Ralph Lauren sunglasses, or everybody's going to Cabo for vacation. I need to do the same thing. And so we start spending based on the people that we're hanging out with. Concerning your specific question, I never went into a banking and finance career. My degree was in banking and finance, but when I had a year left is when I decided that I was going to go become a pastor. And so I finished out my undergraduate degree, but I went right into being a pastor. And so I guess that was my reference group. And not that pastors don't overspend and buy things that they don't need, but I was never working on Wall Street or working in a hedge fund and seeing like a lot of money flow through an organization and big bonuses and people going to spend that. So no, other than someone said, when you understand compound interest, it serves you. When you don't understand compound interest, you become its slave. And so I think that I understand money, and this doesn't work for everyone. Like some people understand money and still live in a ton of debt. But I think understanding some of the value of saving and money and putting some aside and compound interest, and how a credit card interest, you just get behind and behind and behind. So
Yeah.
I probably understood that a little bit more, but I, wasn't making super smart decisions with money, although I never made any super foolish decisions either. But
Yeah, well, I understand that because I used to work in the area, and the particular area in finance I worked in was for retirement funds and saving for your retirement. So I learned very early on that, you need to put aside money early to save for your future, and, compounding returns and all of that stuff. So I think in that way it was good. Not so good for the people I was working with necessarily who has expensive taste, But but with the running a virtual business, this is the last question. Then we'll go into the lightning round, which is really quick and very fun. Running a virtual business requires us to, be on social media because we need to know what's happening. It's the way for us to reach our audience as well. But I'm always very conscious of trying not to let it be too invasive or time consuming. It can be quite detrimental to your mental health if you get caught up in what's happening on social media, comparisonitis, letting all those external influences in. How do you personally manage this and still run a really effective business in today's virtual environment?
Comparisonitis, that's a great word, by the way. Me personally, I have always wanted to be aware of what the social media options and movements were. I learned that in my mid-30s from a guy who was in his late 60s who knew as much about social media as I did. Like, you could talk about any social media platform and he would know it, and he's been on it and he knows what it does. And I learned it from him, and I said to myself, I always want to be in the know. Like, I have 2 teenage kids are at home. Like, I want to know how TikTok works. I want to know how Snapchat works. I want to know all of them. That doesn't mean that I need to be on all of them. And so I'm on the ones that I enjoy, the ones that I resonate best with. Like, I think my message resonates best on other platforms than others. And so I'm aware of the others. And so I know what they do. And if I see anything that I think would be a good fit for what I do, then I might invest a little more time and energy into it. But for the most part, I do the things that I like, the things that I think I find traction in. I have a very specific goal. I want to help people own less and live lives of greater intentionality. And so until now, I think Facebook works pretty well. It tends to be the demographic of people that I'm resonating with. Twitter seems to be a good outlet to reach people and interact with people. And I have a few of the others that I'm on, but those tend to be the social media platforms that I appreciate the most. I just learned pretty early on that the internet is always on. And there's always something that you can be doing online, and there's always another way to try to make $1. And I just, no, I do the things that I enjoy and that I like, and those are the things that you're going to be the most successful with, personally and professionally anyway.
I love that response. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's really important with our kids to be aware of how to use things so that we're not ignorant of it, and we know how to, help them manage their way through it, and we can, just monitor what's happening. That's really important because, otherwise it gets really tricky, cyberbullying and things like that, things we didn't have to deal with in our day. That's something I want to be able to help my kids with if they ever come across that. So it's important for me that I stay abreast of all these things. My husband's not on social media at all. And I think even if I didn't have this business, I would still do it for that reason. And then with the platforms, I always say to people, you don't have to be on every single platform, and the ones that you do choose to be on, to be really intentional about them. So I know a lot of my audience is on Facebook, so I will, post updates, can see what's happening in my space. And Instagram, I just love creating videos. So because I'm not on YouTube as much anymore, that's a really quick and easy way for me to post funny videos or something that I feel people might be interested in. But I'm really loving Twitter at the moment too. And I've been on Twitter for a couple of years, and I don't use that to promote. I use that just to have rich conversations with people. And I don't think it's any coincidence that a lot of writers are on there, because it's all written word. Yeah, it's wonderful. I think and that's how we connected too, was on Twitter as well. So yeah, it's been really, really lovely forum for fostering relationships and meeting people that you otherwise wouldn't meet.
Yeah. Well, you use it well. You do it well. Like, you're good at it. It's a good platform for you. Someone else might be on Twitter and like, I just hate it. I can't get anyone to talk to, like they might just Oh, TikTok is where I don't know how you connect with people on TikTok, but some people probably do.
Yeah,
So.
no, I've heard TikTok is very addictive and it's a rabbit hole. So, and Instagram has Reels now, which is addictive enough. You know, I've had a look at a few, and then sometimes you look at the time and think, oh my gosh, I've been sitting here for half an hour. I've got to go get something productive done. But you know, it helps me get a lot of funny, you know, humorous ideas for things that I want to produce as well. But yeah, you do always have to set yourself an alarm, a timer, so that you don't just end up an hour later saying, I've been sitting here and not got anything done. All right, are you ready for the lightning round?
Okay, yes.
I'm not good at doing a lightning sound effect. Maybe I'll insert that post-production.
Well, lightning doesn't make any sound. That's the thunder. That's thunder that makes the sound.
Oh,
so I don't know how you're going to pull that off, but we'll see.
True. There'll be something. Okay, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning person.
Okay, I'm probably more night owl, but having kids forces you to be a morning person. True. Yes. Favorite junk food?
Favorite junk food. There's a little candy called Sixlets, and I don't know how popular they are. They're not even super popular in the US, but little.
Oh, I've never heard of them. So you guys have really good candy. We call them
I don't think most people like Sixlets, which is why they're hard to find. They've always been my favorite candy.
Well, it's funny because you guys call chocolate bar. We have chocolate bars, which you guys call candy bars, I think, and we call candy lollies over here. So yeah, but someone once sent me, this is back when I was doing more YouTube and experimenting more. I did a box swap with another lady, and she lives in America. So she sent me all the American candy, and I sent her Vegemite and Tim Tams and Aussie sweets, New Zealand sweets. She sent me Jolly Ranchers and Airheads, and I love the Airheads. And I found at a local shopping centre they have a section of international stuff, and you can get the Airheads. I really like the white mystery ones. They taste like wedding cake icing, but they're so expensive, of course, being American, so I don't buy them very often. But I often say to my kids, if you're looking for something, you know, to give me for my birthday, go get me a pack of Airheads or something.
That's funny. And you sent hot chocolate and instructions on how to slam the Tim Tam, I hope.
Oh, yeah, I did send, I think I sent them a link to a YouTube video. They didn't like the Vegemite. Most people don't like Vegemite, but usually they spread it on way too thick. There's, you don't want to, otherwise it's way too potent. Favorite family game or pastime?
Favorite family game or pastime? We play a lot of card games, Rook and Pinochle. But my favorite board game is Settlers of Catan. So we like to play that.
I have to look that up. I've been looking for some games to play with my son. Yeah, he loves games. And is it quite strategic?
Yep. Oh yeah. Once you play Settlers of Catan, it becomes your favorite game forever. So.
I'll definitely look that up. He loves strategic kind of games. What's a travel location on your bucket list?
A travel location on my bucket list. Italy. I'd like to spend some time in Italy. Haven't been there yet.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've only been there once, but it's lovely. Pen and paper or digital?
Pen and paper.
Yeah, me too. I'm always scribbling notes in those 1,000 notebooks that I buy. What's a great documentary or movie that you've watched recently?
Good question. I don't watch a lot. I don't have one.
You haven't been doing any Netflix binging in the pandemic?
If I binge watching anything, I like to watch The Office, the television show, the American.
Oh, that's good.
So if I'm gonna turn something on, it's that. I wish I knew. The Smithsonian Channel has this show in America called Aerial America, I think, and that's pretty well done. And so sometimes on Saturday mornings, before the kids are up, my wife and I will turn that on. I believe it's called Aerial America on the Smithsonian Channel. I recommend it.
That's awesome. I wonder if we can get that here. I have to say. If you could only take 3 items with you to a desert island besides your loved ones, what 3 items would you take?
3 items to a desert island. I would take a Bible. I would take a computer and a wireless router. Can I do that? Can I access the internet from the desert island?
I think that's a necessity nowadays, especially when you're running a business from online as well.
Honestly, you could do, I don't know, you could spend most of your life probably with just a computer and an internet connection about anywhere, but.
Or an iPhone or a tablet if you don't want to take the whole computer. Yeah. A fun fact about you that people don't know.
Fun fact about me that people don't know. I am a twin. I have a twin brother. I am 6 foot, 180. My brother is 6'5", over 200 pounds and is bald. So
is he a minimalist?
No, I don't think he would describe himself as that. He's not overly consumeristic either, but
yeah. So he's not a hoarder then.
No.
What's the best advice that you've ever been given?
Well, faith advice aside, I don't know, but I am so thankful for the marriage that my parents modeled for me. Both sets of my grandparents were faithful and loving to each other. And so both sets of my grandparents were always together. My parents have always been together. And I think the model of family and the marriage relationship and the marriage commitment that my parents and grandparents modeled for me has probably been the most meaningful advice, I think, for life.
I really love that. Yeah, my parents have been together for, 50 years. They passed their 50. It's terrible that I can't remember. Yeah, they would have been married over 50 years now. And my in-laws, as well, are still together. And a very tight family. They're both very tight family units. So it's a great example, and it's so special. Yeah, watching that as well.
I mean, I think it's joyful and meaningful and the best way to live, but it just provides such a sense of stability. I think that the family unit is there and you can count on it, not just for my kids, but for myself as well. I think it really lays a foundation for a lot of success and risk and just being able to live life to the fullest. So.
That was really lovely. Okay, last question. It's a fun one. If a movie was made about your life, who would you choose to play you?
Oh, who would I choose to play me? I've always modeled my hair after Patrick Dempsey.
Good choice. Yeah.
Anatomy, or at least known for that. So he's a little older than me, so I don't know. Actually, I don't know his age. Maybe we're the same. But
you have to go look it up now. I've actually been a fan of Patrick Dempsey since he made those movies in was it the 80s or 90s? I can't remember. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. Yeah, he was quite fun. And then, he was like the nerdy kid. And then to see him on Grey's Anatomy as like the spunk doctor was quite a shift. I was like, everyone's like, he's really lovely. And I'm like, he played this kind of lanky little kid on these movies I know him from. I think people were quite surprised if they hadn't seen those movies.
I don't change my choice. I don't change my hairstyle very often, but whenever I have in the past, I always look to see what is he doing with his hair, because it tends to be pretty similar styling. So he could fill the role.
Oh, he's a great actor too. I think he would do you justice. Yes. Yeah.
Well, let him know.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you. I really appreciate you giving up your time to speak with me. And that was. I hope people have learned a lot from this. I certainly have learned more about you, even though I've been following you for quite a while. There's always something new to learn, and it was a really interesting conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for making this work. And I don't know how much you reveal to people listening on your podcast, but I'm in Phoenix and you're in Australia. and you are up incredibly early in the morning in order to let me do this in the afternoon. So thank you for your flexibility in scheduling, and yeah, all the best.
All the best too. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.